The crew of the USS William P. Lawrence woke before sunrise on April 24, 2025, greeted by calm seas and a sky that glowed soft orange over the Taiwan Strait. For them, the day's agenda was routine: sail from the Philippine Sea to the East China Sea by cutting straight through the slender strip of water that separates Taiwan from mainland China. For politicians and generals watching from thousands of miles away, however, the transit was anything but ordinary. The destroyer's quiet progress would push directly against Beijing's claim that these waters are a domestic passage, not an international route. Operators on the bridge called out the usual morning checklist: fuel levels, weather reports, position updates from satellites, while junior sailors brewed coffee and joked about when they might catch a nap. Outwardly, the environment felt relaxed, yet tension rode every radio wave. The Lawrence's AIS transponder stayed dark, its legal right during a military mission, but overhead, satellites sent constant updates to the Pentagon and to Pacific Fleet headquarters in Hawaii. Every few minutes, a fresh data burst mapped local shipping traffic, weather, and any military aircraft within hundreds of miles. If China tried something reckless, American commanders would know in seconds. Not long after the destroyer crossed the strait's midpoint, loudspeakers in Chinese and English crackled to life on commercial channels. A voice from the People's Liberation Army Navy, PLAN, announced that Chinese forces were watching, tracking, and prepared to warn away the intruder. On shore, the PLA's Eastern Theater Command published a brisk statement for domestic news outlets, accusing the United States of undermining regional stability. Chinese state television soon ran clips of gray destroyers and J-16 fighters supposedly patrolling near the American ship. Grainy, distant images, but potent symbols. Beijing's message was direct: you may enter, but you do so under our gaze. The Lawrence did not answer. Her captain kept the vessel on the scheduled course, engines humming at a steady pace, wake trailing like a chalk line across the water's blue-black surface. There was no sudden speed change, no hard rudder swing, no amplified broadcast announcing American intentions. Everyone on board knew their orders: exercise navigational rights, avoid needless drama, finish before sunset. Freedom of navigation missions, FONOPs, in Pentagon shorthand, are neither new nor rare. American destroyers and cruisers have performed dozens each year in the South China Sea, the Persian Gulf, even near the coast of Russian-held Crimea. The concept is simple: if a strait or sea is considered international under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, U.S. warships will sail there without asking. Washington argues that if it ever stops, then over time coastal states can chip away at open sea rights. Beijing sees the practice as provocation, especially in the 110-mile-wide Taiwan Strait. While Chinese media fanned public anger, the Lawrence sailed on, her sensors pulled in every signal. Electronic warfare specialists listened for unusual radar sweeps. Sonar operators down in the dim Combat Information Center searched for planned submarines. In the air, a patrol of American P-8A Poseidon aircraft orbited well outside visual range, feeding real-time imagery to 7th Fleet headquarters in Yokosuka, Japan. Rumor among the Lawrence's crew held that a Virginia-class nuclear submarine lurked somewhere beneath, but no one said so on an open circuit. A few hours into the transit, China released a second notice, sharper than the first. The PLA claimed its destroyer Luoyang 3 had tailed the American ship at close distance. Commentators on Chinese social media platforms waved miniature flags and praised their navy for escorting out the trespasser. In truth, the planned vessel held a safety gap of several thousand yards, close enough for cameras, but far enough to avoid collision. Chinese fighter jets also appeared on radar, though they maintained standard separation. Both sides understood the invisible frontier between muscle flexing and dangerous escalation. One wrong radar lock or an overeager pilot banking too fast could tip the scene from standoff to shootout. Yet nothing tipped. By late afternoon, the Lawrence cleared the northern exit of the strait and slipped into the East China Sea. Her officers logged the crossing's completion and radioed an unclassified position update for commercial traffic. The destroyer then rejoined a larger strike group built around the aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson, already maneuvering farther east. Viewed from space, the American formation looked like a slow-moving checkmark on the blue canvas of the Pacific. Carrier at the center, cruisers and destroyers spread around like watchful shepherds. While the Lawrence's crew returned to a normal watch rotation, events farther south added fuel to the region's strategic fire. That same week, the United States and the Philippines launched Exercise Balaikatan, Tagalog for shoulder-to-shoulder, their biggest joint drill ever. More than 14,000 troops drilled beach assaults, quick missile deployments, and air defense drills across Luzon and Palawan. U.S. Marines rolled HIMARS rocket trucks onto coastal roads. Filipino soldiers practiced loading anti-ship missiles by forklift. F-35s and Philippine F-A-50 fighters scrambled in paired sorties. Pentagon planners chose the schedule deliberately. Hold live-fire exercises within sight of the very sea lanes China wants to brand as private. Beijing had its own showpieces. Days earlier, the Chinese carrier Shandong and her escorts sailed through the Bashi Channel between Taiwan and the Philippines, testing waters recognized internationally as Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. That cruise rattled politicians in Manila, prompting calls for tighter U.S. cooperation. When news of the Lawrence's straight-line ride through the Taiwan Strait reached Filipino talk shows, hosts openly wondered if Chinese warships might soon park off northern Luzon again. Their anxiety only strengthened public support for deeper security ties with Washington. Inside China, state broadcasters hammered home a narrative of violation and response. Anchors wearing crisp Navy uniforms stood before wall-size maps glowing bright red around Taiwan. They insisted the American passage violated Chinese sovereignty and threatened peace. They showed looping footage of planned destroyers cutting white wakes behind suspected silhouettes of U.S. ships, accompanied by dramatic music and scrolling slogans. To domestic viewers, the message was clear. America is reckless, China is vigilant. Yet propaganda layers did little to hide ground truth unease. Maritime tracking enthusiasts noticed planned supply ships sailing unusually fast from southern bases toward the East China Sea. Civilian airliners skirting Chinese airspace edges reported new radar pings, suggesting airborne early warning planes were sweeping wide arcs. Cyber defense firms in California and Singapore logged spikes in network scans aimed at Pacific military contractors, digital scouts sniffing for weak links in logistics software and fuel ship schedules. All signs pointed to heightened nervousness in Beijing's chain of command. Washington's posture, by contrast, seemed almost casual, at least outwardly. The Navy issued a brief press note. USS William P. Lawrence conducted a routine transit through international waters in accordance with international law. No admiral held a televised briefing. No fiery tweets popped from official accounts. Silence served as the louder statement. We consider this normal. We will keep doing it, and we will not inflate your outrage by answering tit for tat. Still, routine is a slippery word in a region bristling with missiles. U.S. war planners consider the Taiwan Strait one of the planet's tightest danger zones. Shipping there navigates under overlapping rings of shore-based Chinese anti-ship weapons, submarine patrol areas, fighter jet tracks, and surface-to-air missile umbrellas. In a conflict, all those systems could activate within minutes, leaving little time for commanders to puzzle out friend from foe. To prepare, American vessels practice responses, break-turn drills, mass chaff launches, quick vertical launch missile shots. Crews memorize which alarms signal targeting radars versus low-flying cruise missiles. They know that an order to set condition 1 could come in the space of a heartbeat. China's strategy up to now relied heavily on the idea of calibrated risk. Show enough force, shadow ships, low flyovers, gruff radio calls, and assume the U.S. will eventually think twice about pushing deeper. But the Lawrence's quiet confidence punctured that assumption. The destroyer sailed a straight track, ignored heckling, then glided away untouched. For PLA leaders, that could read as a warning. American nerves remain steady, and the alliance network forming around the South China Sea is getting more serious, not less. In the following days, Taiwan's defense ministry raised its alert level a notch. Not because missiles were incoming, but because military movements on both sides of the strait had sped up. Taiwanese F-16s lifted off more frequently, circling longer over the central mountain spine. Supply trucks rolled into hidden tunnels carved decades earlier, their contents invisible to satellites. Island leaders offered no alarmist speeches. They simply treated the latest episode as confirmation that the next crisis may arrive with even shorter notice. Back in Beijing, editors kept replaying the same few seconds of Chinese destroyers tailing the U.S. ship, framing the footage as proof of control. Yet control does not rest in a single video clip. It rests in the ability to dictate pace, to decide who adjusts course and who stays steady. During this episode, the Lawrence dictated the pace. That reality complicated China's long-running gray zone approach, small, incremental actions intended to build a new status quo without sparking open war. If Washington demonstrates that it will meet each increment with firmness, Beijing must either escalate more dramatically or search for fresh tactics. American allies took note. In Tokyo, defense officials privately welcomed the destroyer's assertive transit. Japanese strategists worry that if the U.S. ever hesitates over Taiwan, Japan's own security treaty might be tested next. In Canberra, Australia's parliament debated doubling maritime surveillance flights near the South China Sea, arguing that consistent patrols, not sporadic ones, best defend international norms. Even in New Delhi, analysts associated with India's Navy cited the Lawrence's transit as justification for expanding trilateral exercises with the U.S. and Japan. The ripple effect extended well beyond Taipei or Beijing, yet escalation risk grows with every new demonstration. Picture an especially bold Chinese pilot dipping below a safe altitude and flying directly over an American destroyer's bow. The U.S. ship might light up tracking radars as a warning. The jet's onboard sensors could interpret that pulse as hostile, prompting automatic countermeasures. Another PLA fighter nearby might misread the maneuver, rolling in to protect its wingman. Suddenly, two nations armed with sophisticated weapons are seconds from tragedy because one aviator tried to shave distance for a propaganda shot. That specter of accident is why defense planners describe the Taiwan Strait as a stage with props but no script. Each navy rehearses crisis responses, but the first real catastrophe will not unfold by rehearsal rules. Systems break, people mishear commands, political leaders feel pressure to appear strong. Deterrence works only so long as each actor believes the other is rational and careful. Every close encounter stretches that faith thinner. For now, deterrence held. The Lawrence's cruise ended exactly as scheduled, slipping back into the wider Pacific with no damage, no casualties, no diplomatic climb-down. Exercise Balikatan proceeded without Chinese interference, though PLA drones reportedly watched from the edge of Philippine airspace. Taiwanese life went on, bustling night markets in Taipei, fishermen hauling nets in Hualien, students hurrying to exams as spring warmed the island's humid air. Most residents barely noticed the destroyer's journey, yet its political echo lingered in conference rooms from Washington to Beijing. What happens next? More transits, certainly. The U.S. Navy will keep sending ships through the strait every few weeks or months, signaling that one quiet crossing was not a one-off dare. China will reply with fresh condemnations and carefully staged footage. Each side collects data, counts jets, tracks missile units, and feeds algorithms that game out the next move. Meanwhile, regional partners will keep drilling together, knitting thicker webs of radar coverage and shared logistics. Time, once thought to favor Beijing's slow squeeze, may start to favor those building a collective shield. Does that guarantee peace? Unfortunately, no. More hardware in tight quarters means more chance for sparks. But a pattern of firm, measured assertion may at least convince each player that surprise lunges carry unacceptable cost. If ships can pass without drama and exercises can proceed without harassment, the status quo stays intact another season. That, in international politics, counts as a fragile kind of success. For the sailors of the William P. Lawrence, the day remained mostly routine. They stood watch, logged sensor readings, ate dinner from metal trays, and swapped stories about home while the destroyer sliced northward. Yet their unremarkable voyage also told the latest chapter in a larger contest over rules, rights, and resolve. In calm water beneath clear skies, they showed the world that open seas stay open only when someone is willing to sail them, steadily, confidently, and without asking permission.